Welcome to the Vortex Nation podcast, brought to you by lovers of hunting, shooting, public lands, the Second Amendment, and good food.
All right, what's up, everybody? Jim has passed the intro baton off to me today, so just going to go for it. So this episode is a continuation of our Hunt Year-Round series, which is, if you haven't listened to one before, it's a series where we kind of outline or visit with somebody about a hunt that takes place in a particular month. The month we're in right now is August. We're actually on the cusp of September, but we're squeaking this one in. August is a time where a lot of guys may be just starting to think about fall or upcoming fall hunts, the November whitetail rut. But there's actually a lot of big game hunts a person can engage in this month. In my opinion, some of the best ones that are out there, including Alpine hunting for Sitka Blacktail deer, which is the main topic of today's discussion. So we're joined today by my good buddy, accomplished Alpine hunter and Prince of Wales Island, Alaska resident, Jesse Knock, who I had the pleasure of chasing these super cool deer with 2 years ago. And I'll let Jesse talk a little bit about himself here in a minute once I quit rambling. But Jesse produced some sweet content, takes really rad images, some of which we've used in our catalog. We've used them for different social applications, produced some really cool films, one of which called Sitka Bliss, which I would recommend anybody check out because it is one of the coolest, probably the coolest Sitka Blacktail video I've ever seen. And you get to really witness I guess what the hunt entails, what it has to offer, the country, how rugged it is. But in some ways, Jesse, you guys made it look easy because that video doesn't really do that hunt justice from the difficulty level. But anyway, man, well, yeah, let's have me quit talking here and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Can we also just point out the fact that Jesse is podcasting from? Are you in a boat?
No, I'm actually out on a dock in the middle of a lake in the middle of nowhere, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so this is one of our first remote podcasts, so we're giving this a try, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, we're actually looking and listening to Jesse as he sits on the dock with the lake in the background, like he said.
Sounds and sights of Alaska.
Sounds and sights of Alaska. This is going to be like the ambiance to this podcast. It's going to be perfect.
It is. It's like great white noise, that water in the background. Okay, I interrupted. Jesse.
No, yeah. So
go for it.
Yeah, give us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up on the island, what you do on the island for work, which I think is super cool, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Pretty fortunate to live on Prince of Wales. It's a pretty small island, pretty tough to make a living here unless you're a fisherman or logging, which is kind of a downward spell. So a little harder for that. I myself grow salmon for a living. So I was lucky enough to live in a few places around Southeast Alaska. And I came to a vacation on Prince of Wales in 2007, I believe. I think it was 2008 maybe. And I went to Kaufman Cove on Prince of Wales. And I thought, man, this is the coolest place I've ever seen. We got picked up from the airport in a boat from my ex-wife's dad, and we trolled for coho on the way home and caught a halibut and saw some bucks on the beach. And I was thinking, man, like, how does a guy make a living up here? How does someone call this place home? And I went home and just started scratching around the drawing board about a career change. I used to frame houses for a living, and the housing market kind of took a dive, and I started going back to school and wanted to do something that I really enjoy doing. And pretty much most of my free time is chasing salmon and steelhead and animals. So I figured I'd go back to school for aquaculture. And I started going back to school and started scratching around online and found a job opening for a company out of Southeast Alaska. It's called SARA, and it's SSRAA. And that's Southern Southeast Regional Aquaculture Association. And what we do is just grow salmon for commercial fishermen. It's actually for all user groups, and that includes whales and seals and sport fishermen. But our main funding comes from the commercial fishermen. And they got together and they tax themselves. I'm not the exact number, but I think 3% at one point of their total landing for the year, total catch. And that 3% funds our hatcheries in Southeast Alaska. And I believe there's 5 full-time hatcheries, and there's a few remote facilities in the middle of nowhere that just grow salmon and release them for commercial fishermen. So that's kind of what built my love for Southeast, is being able to float plane around for a job, I guess you call it, and growing salmon. And I'm pretty fortunate to be able to chase salmon around and get paid for it, because I'd be doing this stuff on my own without getting paid. So it's pretty cool up here. And I'm starting to scratch the surface. I'm such a noob up here. I've been here since 2009, and that's when I moved my family up here full time, and I have never looked back. I grew up in Washington State, right by Mount St. Helens, and where I grew up around there, it was wild, and it kind of Weyerhaeuser took over, and it kind of got gated, and some access kind of got denied. And here is just like when I grew up. It is so wild, and there's so much opportunity for the adventurous guy or woman that wants to get out and just do something. And you can't lose up here. You pretty much just look around, and it's just picturesque wherever you look. It's an adventure. You can go in any direction, and there's something new, something cool to do. It's just crazy. I'm still in awe, honestly. I feel very fortunate to call this place home. It's awesome.
No, man, you're totally right. I mean, it's definitely, Southeast Alaska is definitely, in my opinion, one of the coolest places in the world. And, part of that, I'm originally from Washington State as well. And so I think, you grow up with a love for, salmon and steelhead, and, I guess we have Columbia Blacktail down there, which are, similar to the Sitka Blacktails, but kind of just that Pacific Northwest vibe with the animals and the landscape. And, I mean, Alaska really is, particularly Southeast Alaska, when you compare it to, Washington, Oregon, it's almost like a window into what that place used to be like, and really how great things can be. And, I mean, you talk about just how rich an area it is with game and sea life. And, no, man, I'm envious. It's a cool spot for sure. So,
yeah, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. And, you live off the land here. It's very subsistence driven. Like I said, Prince of Wales is pretty remote. There's a clinic. There's not even a hospital. There's no emergency room. Literally, if you have an emergency, you have to call if it's on a weekend, and the doctor will meet you there with a nurse. And I had an infection in my hand a couple of years ago from bear. Actually, it's what it came down to, a fall bear that I took. And they ended up meeting me on a Sunday evening about 9 p.m. and giving me shots of antibiotics and actually kind of saving the infection in my arm. It was kind of getting pretty bad. But you think that you live in town and there's people around, but you also got to understand that you walk off the road 10 minutes and you're wild. There's no cell service around. The inReach is just great now, but and it's wild. It makes it that much more exciting to me, honestly. It just adds to it.
Yeah, it does add to it. I mean, that's definitely something to take into consideration. You're really on any hunt, but I think particularly Alaska, man, you're on your own. I mean, you're self-reliant, or you and your buddy, whoever you're with. But even if you have somebody with you, if something goes south, you got to be able to at least try and be able to take care of it. You bring up like a really big thing there with the inReach and having comms to be able to at least get out if you do have some sort of incident or something going on. But that's a big deal. Like you said, that's part of the allure and what you're after, and then one of the big challenges at the same time. So.
You must pretty much have to have do you have your inReach on you just like at all times?
Yeah, dude, for the most part. Around right here, a new range that I kind of hunted this year, there's some cell service, but inReach is pretty much the only way. Sat phone, inReach. When Mark and I went on a float plane hunt, it was a sat phone there from the lake. And even then, it's kind of spotty. You take a gamble. Be careful what you wish for, as I always say. You want to venture until it comes down time to venture, and it really shows you what you're made of, and it'll test you mentally. That's for sure. It's not just the physical part, just the mental part. It's unlike anything I've experienced.
For sure.
That's wild.
For sure,
That's
man.
wild, man.
So, getting back to hunting blacktails up in the Alpine, which actually, I mean, the blacktails, we can kind of talk a little bit about it. But when the season opens, it's going to open in August, which I know that's when you like to chase them. And you've been hunting a fair amount this fall and had some success, which is super awesome. So maybe we'll kind of talk about those hunts a little bit as well. But then those deer, I mean, they're kind of going through a progression. It's a long season, but it's almost like, the way I look at it, like it's almost like 3 different hunts, maybe 4. But, you start off in the Alpine, and then shortly after the season opens, those deer begin to move down, and then they move down and down and down. But maybe describe that a little bit, Jesse, and kind of how that goes.
Yeah, like right off the bat here for a Prince of Wales resident, there's a subsistence season, and that opens up the 24th of July, I believe, for me. So it's crazy that I'm actually hunting deer in July. And right there at the 1st of August, those deer are such in their summer habits that they just are in bachelor groups. Mainly the bucks kind of hang out together. They're growing their antlers right then. So I think it's like a 1/4 inch a day up what they're growing. So it's so thick here that they want to be above timberline because they can grow. There's so much green and food up there for them that they can just grow to their full potential. You get into some of the thick stuff on the way up, they can break antlers, they can disfigure them, and any ungulate like that. They want their antlers for the rut. That's their main tool to breed, to fend themselves and everything. So the main bucks that I'm after kind of go up in Alpine. Not all of them. I'm kind of, I'm by no means any expert on Alpine deer or Sitka Blacktails themselves. I'm just trying to learn, but there's deer all up and down the mountain. There's some really nice bucks that stay on the beach level that you'll see from July all the way until the rut comes. The majority of deer do come down off the mountain once they rub their velvet off. Once the feed starts dying up there, then they'll start moving down into that mid-range. And when I talk about mid-range, it's out of the open face green Alpine, but it's still considered Alpine. I guess it would be sub-Alpine. There's still shady Alpine spots, but there's also timber. There's cover for them. There's alders. There's different food for them. I know cedar's a big one. Once you get down, drop in elevation, the trees really start picking up. I mean, they're everywhere. And that's where the food really forms. So September, October, you'll get a mid-range on the mountain. You'll find them in Alpine on the timberline most of the year. But everybody, kind of concentrates once they start migrating down when the food kind of dies off or the snow hits. Granted, we haven't really had a significant winter in a while since I've been here. There's been some snowfall, but for the most part, it's been pretty dry for snow. So the deer have been staying up at higher elevations, which make it a little bit tougher for the rut hunts. They're not kind of pushed down into the areas, which, I mean, it's fair game for the deer. I mean, it all adds to the hunt of it. I kind of like it myself. But it's not historic like they usually get snowed off the mountain and they come down about second week of October and start sniffing around and looking for rutting. I think the peak of the deer rut I've heard here is like first week of November. They rut all through November. But what I've seen is that second week of November, that's when the deer are really chasing and they're really getting after it. So, but all of August for Alpine, you can't beat August. I mean, the bucks are up there the entire time. Right now, they're starting to rub their velvet off right now. I know a couple buddies just got some really nice bucks up on a really big mountain. And I'm just super jealous because I love hard-horned Alpine bucks. I love the velvet and it's cool. But having a buck that's rubbed off up there and just that bright red antler with the green contrast in the background is just, man, it is cherry. I love it.
That's cool.
Doesn't get much better to me.
Can you describe for us flatlanders what does the Alpine look like?
It's kind of hard to explain. I've heard a couple of different things, like Lord of the Rings, like a prairie type land, lots of green, really open, just very green, vibrant green, and very low bushes.
Because basically you're so high, you're out of the trees, right?
Yes, exactly. It's above timberline. There's no big trees up there. The highest tree probably is 4 feet or so, and I think that's a scrub cedar. They call it buckbrush here. So those deer are bedding out in the wide open almost all the time. The only thing that really pushes them off the mountain is hunting pressure, whether it's humans, wolves, black bear, or really big wind. Once the big winds hit, they kind of go down in that timberline and get into some protected area, and just kind of wait it out. But then once the storm kind of goes off, they head right back up to the above timberline. So
yeah, that's interesting.
And you can glass forever. That's what's so cool is you can just see for miles. I would imagine I've never mule deer hunted, but if you look at like Colorado type high country when you're above timber and the green and the rock formations, it's similar to that. You just sit back and be patient and look on some faces, and pick out a buck you really want.
That's super cool. I've always thought about the weather and the snow, but not necessarily like the wind being like a big factor in dictating, whether those deer are going to be, out at that elevation. But I mean, it totally makes sense. I mean, you want to be out of the wind, and if you're exposed, you're going to find a way to not be exposed. And that's just something I personally hadn't thought about.
Does that have to do with? I'd imagine that wind has got to be pretty biting. But does it also have anything to do with the fact that, I'd imagine when it's really windy, it probably throws off some of their senses, their protective instincts and senses that they be smelling prey or predators that might be coming for them and stuff?
Yes, exactly. I think that's the biggest thing, is not having that security of hearing. I think their hearing is just cut off so bad that it makes them nervous. And there's so many predators up here that I mean, the deer are wild and they'll give you a little bit, but they've also been hunted before by lots of different creatures. So they bring their A game to the show. That's for sure. You gotta really want it to get a nice mature buck. Some of those younger bucks up there, I don't like using the term dumb, but just kind of new. They don't really know what's going on. But some of those older, big mature bucks that you're after up on the top, they've been run through the ringer a couple times. So once the wind starts going, they're the first ones to take off. And actually, I almost got a buck this year, belly crawling from about 100 yards, and the wind was just ripping, and the deer just got super nervous, and I was trying to close to about 20 more yards to get within bow range of him. And that was actually close enough with the wind to actually take him, and he just got nervous for some reason and pretty much waved goodbye at me with his tail and left my life forever.
Man,
you've been heartbroken ever since.
It was great.
Brutal.
Oh, I have. Yes, I lost sleep over it. It was a very nice buck. And it was actually not even the biggest buck in the bachelor group, but there was a 4-point in the group, and I come up right in the middle of them and didn't realize. I saw the bucks from a long ways away, and when I got over to the area they were at, about 1.5 miles away, it looked completely different than what it looked at through the spot and scope. And I ended up coming out right in the middle of the deer, and the 4-point went off the mountain first thing. He didn't even see me. He just knew something wasn't right. He took off, and then there was a big, nice 2x3, really dark brown velvet. I was actually more excited to take that deer than the 4-point, just because he was really big. He was a big, mature deer, and I belly crawled like nobody's business. And I thought it was going down. I was pretty much trying to figure out if I was going to bone him out or just leave the bones in and pack him out. That's how close I was. And when you get that confident, I think sometimes it doesn't work out for you. But it's all part of the fun. I went back with a smile on my face the whole time. I went back to camp. It was a solo hunt, and I went back to my tent, ended up finding a ptarmigan on the way, and drowned my sorrows, and I arrowed a ptarmigan, and I roasted him on a fire that night. And I mean, you can't beat it. I was, sitting in the tent, and
that's like, when I think of Alaska, I think of just doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get a deer, so I'll get a ptarmigan,
It's just, man, it's just like living at its purest form. You're just like, I don't know. That's super cool, man. Well, you're talking about the country, and, we're talking about bucks and big bucks. And I think one thing, if a person's maybe more accustomed to hunting whitetails or mule deer, things of that nature, a big Sitka Blacktail is definitely a different animal, I guess, talking antler-wise or even body-wise, compared to some of those other species of deer. In fact, a buddy of mine, he loves hunting mule deer. Not you, Ryan, but I know you do as well. He just couldn't get over. He's like, "What do you mean that's a big one?" So maybe describe the deer and just kind of I guess their body composition and antler composition for people that might not be familiar.
Yeah, they are a lot smaller. They're surprisingly smaller for everybody that comes up here. I've never kind of coosed deer, but I've heard that they're a little bit bigger than that, but smaller than a Columbia blacktail. And I grew up around Columbia blacktails in Washington, so I kind of thought I had an idea in my head. And then the deer are very proportioned to their antlers here. So when you see a deer far off, when you see like a mainframe, nice mature buck, you're thinking, he's got to be like 200 pounds, maybe. And you get up there and it's, I think the biggest buck I shot was maybe 140 pounds. I'm not sure exact live weight on him, but very smaller than what you think. The antlers, they grow a proportion of their body, but you're talking a world-class Sitka Blacktails, 120 inches. They do shoot them on this island every couple of years around that size. And that's what this island is known for, is genetics. They get 4 points here. They get really big here. All Southeast Alaska islands pretty much have them on there. Some hunting's better on other places, but I think the main pressure on Prince of Wales is because you can come here and shoot, a record like a Boone and Crockett class buck, and I'm talking 110 inches. I think is Boone and Crockett. So
right,
it's a different creature in itself.
Nope, that's super cool. And I think really anything in Alaska, I guess, but for the person who likes to chase adventure and likes to see amazing places, like we keep talking about how amazing this is. I think someday, hopefully our listeners, some of them get to see it for themselves someday.
Google images.
That's a good way.
That'll
to do
give you
it.
just a taste. It won't give you the full thing, but
I mean, it's one of the coolest toughest hunts out there. I'd rank it. I guess I've never hunted sheep before, but I'd rank it up with any sheep or goat hunt as far as difficulty level, as far as the country that the animals live in. I know one time I was actually glassing a mountain goat. This wasn't on Prince of Wales, and I was like, oh, what's above that mountain goat? And there was a blacktail above the mountain goat, like 20 yards, feeding above the mountain goat. So I mean, they're living in some of that same super gnarly country. And I guess where I'm going with a little bit is if you're the type of the person that's always wanted to go on that hunt, you really can. The hunt is in a lot of ways the same. You're getting that same experience. You're in the same country. It's the same challenges, but it's an over-the-counter tag, and you can just go.
Is it serious? Okay, that's what I was wanting to ask, because whenever I hear about like some super cool adventurous Alaskan hunt, I always just assume in my head, like, yeah, I'll never go on. I'll never be able to get that.
Right.
And I'm almost certainly incorrect, but this is just an over-the-counter tag that you can go and get.
So it is, and Jesse, I mean, heck, he lives up there. He can speak to it a lot more than I can, but I'll just keep talking anyway. But, so there's a couple species in Alaska, or certain species that you must hunt. You either have to be a resident or you have to hunt with an outfitter. So that's going to be brown bear, Dall sheep, and mountain goat. But outside of that, and there's definitely special draws and units, so you got to be mindful of that. You can't just go anywhere you want when you want, but there are definitely some over-the-counter options where you really can do that. And I think, to my knowledge, this is one of those hunts, Jesse, right?
Yeah, it's a very doable hunt for a guy that just loves adventure. Not real expensive. I think the tag prices just went up last year a little bit, and licenses, but I think it's $300 for a tag now and $100 and something for your license, which it's under $500 for your license and tags, I believe, which is very affordable for a world-class adventure like this. You could fly up to Ketchikan, and you take a ferry over to Prince of Wales, and there's a couple options. You can float plane into a spot, you can boat into a spot, or you can drive and start hiking into a spot. And it's not hard. You can start looking around on Google Earth and finding the spots that have no timber on the top. And I'm telling you, about every mountain on this island or around Southeast itself, if you just put in your time and want it bad enough and get up to the top, you will see bucks up there. Some places are going to have more than others. Some places are going to have, a lot more mature deer because it gets hunted. But for the most part, man, if a guy's looking for an adventure, just something to do that's a little different than he's probably used to, I highly suggest this type of hunt, Southeast in general, because you're going on a deer hunt and you can go fishing. You can catch halibut and lingcod and yellow eye snapper. And around this time in August, there is coho salmon, there's Chinook salmon out in the bays. I mean, you can do it all. You can literally go home with as much as you can pack in your cooler, and big smile on your face, feed your family.
That's what I always hear about going to Alaska is people. It's just like a freaking outdoorsman's paradise. I mean, when you go, it's not just sort of like, oh yeah, I'm going for like this one thing. It's like, yeah, you can go and you can fish and you can do everything.
I mean, it's like, I always describe it, and I maybe even have, like, to me, it's like the most giving place in the world when it comes to those things. But it also, like, gives zero Fs about you at the same time. Like, it can take everything away in a heartbeat. It is dangerous. Jesse was talking about, and I'm not trying to scare anybody off, but, like, Jesse was talking about, if you want it bad enough. And I think, a hunt like this, I mean, you got to want it. You better have your stuff together on a pretty serious level as well. I mean, the hunt's not without its dangers, right? And I don't know if you want to talk, but Jesse, you had like a pretty crazy incident a couple years ago, and you're like super experienced dude,
Yeah, that taught me it can happen to anybody. And it's just crazy how quick it can happen. Everything was going great. So this was about 4 years ago, I think now. I try to block it out as much as I can, but I think 4 years ago, it was on opening day, August 1st. I was living in Ketchikan at the time, and I went up a local mountain right in town, and it's steep. It's goat country. There's blacktail and mountain goats in the same area, and that was my main reason to hike up there. Was I drew a really coveted goat tag right in town. It's a very special goat tag, really cool spot. So I kind of, more than anything, just wanted to scout and kind of, maybe bonus shoot a deer while I was up there looking for a mountain goat. So I went up top, like always, kind of fogged in. So I kind of hung out and made some coffee and just kind of hung out. And the fog kind of started lifting here back and forth. And about a week earlier, I saw a nice buck up there through the spotting scope and wanted to go back and just see if I could find him in that area. And I end up looking down in the basin where they're at. Nothing. I think about an hour went by. I kind of just relaxed. I threw a little tarp over the top of me, just kind of waited out the little rain squall and the fog. And all of a sudden below me was a silhouette of 3 deer, 3 nice blacktail, right in the silhouette of the fog on a peak below me. And it was really cool too, because you could just see the outline of their antler and just the outlines of the body. And it was really cool. But they were straight down below me, a little bit to the right and straight down. And I snuck down over on top of them. And I think I got about 152 yards above them. And they're literally straight down. And I'm talking goat country, like cliffs. And there was a really nice 3-point. And I'm talking, when I say a 3x3, it's 3 on each side with eye guard. So it's a nice velvet buck, and he's sitting there with 2 other younger deer. And I went back and forth for probably an hour if I was gonna shoot this deer, because I couldn't find a way to get down below to where they were at. And so I gave up, and I turned around and I started walking back to the main trail to go further down in the range of mountains. And I end up seeing a trail that I thought I can make on one side of the mountain, and kind of gave myself some confidence, like, whoa, I think I can make that. So I told myself, if that nice buck stands up out of his bed, I'm going to take him. And it was like I wanted. I went back about 10 more minutes. He stood right up, and I took one shot at him from 152, like I said, straight down. And I actually dropped him right in his tracks. And he dropped right there. And then I was thinking, oh, okay, what'd you do now? Because I wasn't completely sure I could get down to him. And that's a big point to make, is make sure that you can get to your animal before you take it. You can bite off more than you can chew, very easy here. So I put my crampons on, and I marked it on my GPS, and I kind of actually made a little bit of film and told myself, oh, I just shot this deer. Hopefully I can make it down and don't fall, and kind of laughed about it and thought it wasn't a big deal. Threw my camera in my backpack. So then I started making my attempt to get down that side of the spine. I think I made it down about 50, 60 yards straight down, and it started getting just a little bit steeper than what it looked. And it was really wet. And like I said, I had crampons and trekking poles, which is a very big thing for mountain hunting here. Very big thing. And I was actually giving up. I told myself that I was going to hike around and back out and go around the mountain range, which is going to take me probably about another 4 hours to get to that deer. And I started side hilling the mountain a little bit to get to a ridge that met to where I was at that had some brush on it. And I'm talking, it's so steep that I was going to grab the brush and pull myself, climb out of the mountain that I was in. So I started side hilling, and what I didn't realize is that there was a creek that was running down in a little gully that I had to make it across. And when I got to it, it was a lot slicker and softer than I thought. And I kind of froze up. I knew I wasn't in a good spot. It was really steep below me and open. And I'm talking, you can't grab on anything. And I think it was once I told myself that I was pretty much scared stiff, and I got myself to get going again, one foot in front of the other. On my 3rd step after that, I broke free. And I had with Vortex rain gear on, and that stuff up on the grass up here is like a garbage sack. It literally, you just slide. There's no stopping. Whew. So I broke free and started sliding down the mountain, and I don't really know how far I got, probably 50 yards or so. And I started digging into the mountain with my hands, and I'm trying to stop myself from falling. And I mean, I broke my fingernails from trying to dig in so hard into the mountain to stop myself. So then I got about 50 yards down, and I knew I wasn't going to stop because I started picking speed up. And then I went off a small embankment, just a small cliff, I guess. I don't know how far it was, but when I went off that, when I hit the ground, I really started sliding really fast, and I was disorientated then. I didn't really know which way was up or down, and I really started picking up speed. And that's when I pretty much knew that it wasn't working out in my favor. I knew something was wrong, so I started kind of clenching up. I knew that and there's cliffs everywhere. I knew that, which cliff am I going to fall off? Is it the 400-foot cliff, or is it the 10 to 20-foot cliff? And I'm blessed to say that it was the 10 to 12-foot cliff that I flew off of. And I hit on my backpack, and I had a full backpack. And luckily I landed on my back. And I think the backpack broke most of my fall. And I remember hitting the ground on my back, and then I flipped around immediately from the force of going downhill. And when I flipped around, I hit my face on a rock. And I remember distinctively hitting my face and telling myself, like, oh, that's not good. Like, that's going to leave a mark, kind of, And but I was aware what was going on, but then I passed out and I slid down. I don't know how much further down to a small flat in the mountain. And I woke up wet and I didn't know what was going on. I lost consciousness. I didn't know where I was at. I just remember waking up feeling wet and remember thinking, why are you wet? And then I woke up and realized that, wow, you're up on the mountain, you fell, like you're on a ledge, on a cliff, like you're hanging out, and I was so disorientated. Like I was calling for help for a second. I didn't know where I was at. And then it all came to me like, wow, you're the only one that's going to save yourself right here. No one knows you're out off this. I didn't have it in reach. I had a cell phone. There was no service.
Oh.
No one knew the goalie I was in. So I was telling myself, like, you're the one that's going to get yourself out of this. So when I hit my face, I broke my 3 front teeth out and I broke my maxilla, which is the bone that, holds your teeth in your face. And I knew I felt up and there was dirt clods in my mouth and I knew that I broke my face and it was bleeding pretty bad. So what I did was pulled my I had an undershirt in my backpack and I pulled it out and I strapped it to my face to stop the bleeding as hard as I could.
Ugh.
And then I told myself, man, you just got to start scaling up the mountain. There was a main trail at the top of the mountain where I fell. I just told myself that, like, because I was bleeding so bad in the beginning that, like, I didn't know what artery I hit. I didn't know what was going on. So I was just trying to get literally to the top of the mountain just in case someone found me. If I passed out, hopefully someone can find me. So I started scratching up the mountain, and luckily I found a brush patch to get up the mountain. And I get up to right where I fell and I see my gun laying there and it's literally stuck in the mountain pretty much. So, like a dummy, I scaled over to the left a little bit and grabbed my gun and got that. And then got up to the top of the mountain. And when I got up to the top of the mountain, I kind of realized that, your ankle's kind of, it's tingling. It's doing something a little different. My adrenaline is kind of wearing off. So I used my gun as a walking stick because I lost my trekking pole and I started walking to the trail and there's a cabin up there and I found the cabin and I was thinking, oh man, someone's going to be here. Someone's going to be here. And no one was there. Go figure. So I turned around and went back down the trail. And by then I'm really starting to limp. I could really feel my ankle was really hurting. The bleeding was stopped. So I felt good about that, but my ankle was really hurting. So I get down the trail a little further and I'm talking, I probably made it half a mile or so walking. And I saw a couple. And they were coming up the mountain hiking for just like a day hike. And this is like a popular hiking spot for people in Ketchikan. And they were looking at me like, what in the world? And I was embarrassed, to tell you the truth, that like, I didn't want to stop their trip. And they were like, what do you want me to do? Who do you want me to call? And I honestly told them to continue their hike up the mountain. And then on the way back down the trail, if they found me, maybe give me a shoulder to walk out on, because I just thought my ankle was broke and I'll walk out and be fine. And reluctantly they went off. I mean, I pretty much had to like shoo them away from me because they didn't want to leave me. But I made it down about another, I don't know, maybe half mile. The trail itself, I think, is 4 miles total. And then my ankle was about done. I was pretty much, knew that, I wasn't going to make it much further. And then there was another couple and they were on a day hike, and it's crazy to say that, but they were nurse interns from Washington State, and they actually worked at the Ketchikan Hospital, and they were amazing. The lady pretty much threw me on the ground and took my boot off and like was making sure all my vitals were good and, made sure everything was fine. And then asked me who I wanted to call. And I was so disorientated that I had my cell phone on me the whole time and didn't even think of using it. I just wanted to get off the mountain. So they called my friend. I told him to call my friend that lives right at the bottom of the mountain, and I still wanted to get out on my own. I didn't want to be rescued. I didn't want to accept defeat. I wanted to do it on my own. So I told him to call my friend, which is an awesome mountain hunter. He's one of the top at Alpine hunt. So I called him and asked him if he could just hike up the mountain and help me get out, like a shoulder, like a crutch, just help me limp off the mountain. And he says, yep, no problem. I'll be up there as fast as I can go. So they hang up the phone, and then about another 5 minutes go by, and I'm thinking, man, you saw a helicopter go by, and there's a really awesome pilot up here that actually he flew us into another float plane hunt, and he owns a helicopter business. And I saw him touring some tourists around the mountain, looking at mountain goats, and I thought, man, if I could call Ryan, he might be able to pick me up. And I had his number, and we called him, and man, he was like, I will be there in 20 minutes. And I laid there the whole time, and the fog was in and out like Southeast Alaska. I mean, it was just in and out. And I'm thinking, man, are you going to get out of here? What's going on? And it ended up taking about an hour or so for him to get there, just because of the fog, the weather, for him to get to the landing that I was on. But man, grace of God, he landed right where I was at. And I gimped into the helicopter, with a mouthful of dirt and broken ankle. And I left my gun and backpack with the couple, and they waited there for my friend Matt to come up. And he showed up right after I, ended up getting helicoptered off to the hospital, and ended up having to go through like a facial surgery to reconnect. My face actually just broke it. There was a couple bone graft surgeries that I had to go to. So it was an eye opening. It was a learning lesson. It was for sure. It's kind of hard to talk about sometimes, but
that was a heck of a learning lesson. I mean, sometimes it's like you stub your toe and it's like, oh, I just won't do that again.
Yeah. No, man. I mean, you've told me that story before, and like every time I hear it, it's like I've got chills the whole time. I get emotional just thinking about it, just because I know. I don't know, but I can imagine just having been in some of that country and in a couple of hairy spots where I was a little bit over my head, and what could have happened, and then hearing that from you, it's just like, I don't know, man. Like you said, it's eye opening. It's a tough lesson, but I mean, it might save your life in the future. It might save somebody else's life in the future, because it's stuff that you got to be thinking about and cognizant of. Like, I mean, you brought up some really good points. Like, you see an animal, like you get excited. I mean, there's things you can't know, right? Like, you think you can get there, or it can really look like you can get there, but then all of a sudden maybe there's some unforeseen obstacle or trench or whatever. And so, I mean, it's not like you didn't do anything wrong, but it just shows that it's important to at least try to know as best as you can that you can get to that animal or find a route, and then also, have equipment there to help get you out if you need to. Do you think when you were sliding, if you had something to like self-arrest with, like an ice axe or something, that could have helped or not?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I think it would have, but I think at the same time that you got to have proper training in that type of situation, because even if I would have had it and I hadn't practiced with it, I probably wouldn't have been fast enough to think about, this is what you need to do.
Right.
I probably would have been still scratching and trying to figure out where I was at, let alone digging in. But I think about that all the time. I think that probably would have stopped me from, falling.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I mean, it's super tricky. And I think, one thing we should point out is Alaska tough, because I think you definitely exemplify Alaska tough, and the folks that I've met up there, man, dude, they're a different breed of cat, man. Like, I think you got to be tougher to live up there.
You got to be. So can I take some of the stuff we've talked about here and turn it into a little bit? So let's say that somebody, like, this hunt sounds super awesome. It sounds like it's potentially dangerous, right? And it's not for the faint of heart. Like, it's an adventurous hunt, right? So as somebody who's never been to Alaska before, like, if I want to go on this hunt, I mean, I'm a kind of an adrenaline junkie. I like an adventure, but I don't know what I'm getting into. Like, if I wanted to go on this, do I just book a flight, go out there, get the tag, just hike up the mountain with, like my flannel and my rifle slung over my shirt? Or what's the best, like, for somebody who's never been out there before, like, what kind of gear do you want to, like, get? What do you want to go out with, a guide at first or somebody local at first, so you don't wind up at the bottom of a cliff? Or what's kind of the recommendation there for somebody like that?
I called Jesse.
Yeah, it's gonna depend totally on your skill level. Like you said, if you have some type of mountain experience, I think a guy can just come up here right off the bat and go pick a mountain and go hike up and probably find what he's looking for. But if somebody's new, starting out, I honestly would probably get online and research. Myself, I try to find forums. I try to find people that are like-minded into the same thing. And I know a lot of people are they don't want to get about too much information. I'm kind of the opposite. I try to help people out as much as I can, because like in a situation just like we're bringing up with the fall, to help somebody not go through that is paramount. To just to get past that right there and to find somebody that does it and to tell you what's going on with it, what you need. Like, to me, a big thing is having positive connection on the mountain. There's mountains that are very steep and there's some mountains that are not steep. It's all what you want. And if you're hunting the steep mountain, I highly recommend, like a lot of people here, they run corked boots. I know the log is big on the logging industry here. They can run up logs, and I'm talking spiked boots. I myself can't hike in extra tough rubber boots. The ankle support is just not there for me. So I choose a really stiff soled mountain boot. And what I do is I have slip-on crampons. And there's a couple brands out there that are good. They're all pretty much good. You want to get something. I myself use Catula micro spikes, and they slip right over your boots. Whatever boot you can wear, rubber boots, leather boots, anything. And that right there is going to give you something, a more of a positive connection to the ground. Another big thing that I highly recommend is trekking poles. And I know a lot of people you don't really need them here and there, but having 4 points of positive connection to the mountain is paramount. Is having 2 crampons and 2 trekking poles in, that right there will steep you in the mountain. When I fell, I had my trekking poles up and 1 foot in cross, and I didn't realize that I only had 1 positive foot connection right then. And now when my feet are up in the air, I have both trekking poles dug both right into the mountain. So it's like you're holding on to something yourself,
Yeah.
And that's huge up there. We get on that steep slope, and it affects everybody different. I've seen people get up there and their balance gets off just from like vertigo or just the slope. It just kind of throws them off, or they can't get their center of gravity. They keep wanting to lean downhill. And like I said, if you have, rubber rain gear, Gore-Tex, most all rain gear is slick. You will start, going. But trekking poles, crampons, those are the 2 biggest things. And then, like I brought up on the hunt, just not biting off more than you can chew. Just take it easy on your first one. You don't have to go in those spots to find deer. This country is game rich enough that I myself am a venture type junkie to where I kind of pick spots. I don't find areas for deer themselves. I find areas because they look really cool to me, and I just wanted to venture around in there. And there happens to be deer in that area, which, it works out as a bonus. But I don't go looking for mountains just for the deer themselves.
Yeah. This time
if
of
that
year
makes any sense.
Totally. This time of year, then you're saying it's with a bow, right? Or is it with a rifle?
Bow or a rifle. So it's kind of
rifle.
It's bow or rifle.
Okay. So then
muzzleloader. Yep.
Sweet. So what's kind of the tactic then to go after one of these guys? Like you said, it seems like it's pretty game rich. So your problem might not be finding one, but I imagine you still probably gotta post up in glass. Wait for fog to clear at times. I keep hearing about fog, but when that clears, are you sneaking up on them? Are you taking a little bit longer poke on them, or?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. I grew up archery hunting in Washington State, and you had to buy an archery tag. You had to pick whether you want bow or rifle. So I grew up primarily archery hunting. Here, it's any weapon, and it opens up. There's no closed season for a weapon. There is draws for bow only, but the main tactic is just getting behind your glass. It's just getting up there. Guys have success walking bucks down, and you'll jump them and you can shoot them with a bow or you can shoot them with a gun. But what I like to do is get above timberline where you can see a long ways. And I like to get on an adjacent mountain if I can, across the mountain that I expect the bucks to be on. And then I sit over there, and what I like to do is usually give myself a day, half day, a good morning or a good evening. And you can't always do that because we always talk about the fog. It is very real up here. The fog comes in all the time because when you're hunting, the furthest away you're hunting on like Prince of Wales is talking, 10, 15 miles from the ocean pretty much at all times. So you're not very far from the coastal fog, the sea fog. So what I like to do is get above timberline, get the wind in a good direction, get on a mountain, and just kind of sit back and relax. And I know the term gets used a lot, let your glass do the walking, but that is so paramount up here to not beat yourself up, not put yourself in situations that you don't have to. You can sit back and look, and it's just very similar to a mule deer hunt. If guys are, experienced with mule deer hunting, it's just sitting back and being patient with your binoculars and finding the animal you want, getting the wind direction in your favor. And then like most mountain creatures, if you get above them, you pretty much own them. The deer up here don't look up very often. They bed with their backs up to rocks. They bed very high up on the top of the mountain. The smaller bucks will kind of be all over the mountain, timberline at the top, but the bigger, more mature bucks, they're always kind of seem like they're up on the top of the mountain. And what I like to do is circle around the mountain and then come right over the top of them. And like I said, you can make an archery stock with a gun and shoot them from 30 feet away with a gun too. That's what's cool is it's just I'm really getting to like gun hunting. Me and Mark talk about all the time that I'm going over to the gun. It's cool to be able to sneak in and enjoy the hunt for yourself and not worry about what weapon I'm taking the animal with. It's over sometimes. So it's pretty cool that you can just pick whatever you feel. Some days I like going up there with a bow and just getting my butt kicked and chasing deer around the mountain like I don't know what I'm doing. But honestly, sometimes I like going up there, and if I see something I want, I love having the chance that I'm going to take that animal home with me. Like the meat up here it's a big deal. There's everything's very expensive on this island. Anything that you can help out with, to save money it's big time.
That's cool.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, and that's a big deal. I mean, like you're talking about the subsistence side of things. I mean, that's such a big part of living up there, whether, the game or the fish or things like that. And then I guess one thing, circling back, we keep talking about the fog. And definitely the weather up there, to me, is some of the gnarliest, fastest changing stuff I know I've personally ever seen. Maybe describe, and we're talking about a hunt that's taking place into August, right? And I know, like, when I watched yours and Ryan's video, I was like, oh, dude, sweet August. Like, our biggest problem is just going to be the bugs, and we'll be hunting in freaking merino tees the whole time, and this, that, the other. And that definitely wasn't the case when we went up there, but I think that's often not the case. So maybe tell any listeners who are thinking about that, like, weather-wise. I mean, you could get great weather, but, like, what they're likely to encounter and maybe what they need to really be prepared for.
Yeah, I think the actual taking of the animal itself, I don't want to say easy, but it's one of the easier parts. The biggest thing is your mental. It is dealing with fog. And I've hunted up here with all different types of people from all over, and everybody takes it a little different, and it is kind of unnerving. I remember when I first came up here, having that fog that comes in and you can't see 10 feet in front of your face, and you're relying on your GPS to make it back to your tent. It can make the toughest guy feel like he is just nothing. It makes you feel so small, and I always say it slaps you back down to zero. And I think that's the biggest thing is getting mentally prepared. It's kind of joke around, but if someone wants to come up on an Alpine hunt here, I suggest setting up a tent in your closet for about 3 days, maybe 4, and shutting all closet doors and sitting in the dark, and then having your family make mysterious noises out throughout the house, and you got to try to figure out what that is because you've been in your tent for 3 days and you don't know what it is. And if you can survive that, if you can hang in your tent for that long and not knowing if you're getting out that day, it'll be a walk in the park after that.
This is an excellent tactic, like pre-torture.
They look at me like I'm joking. I'm like, no, serious. No, hang out in your tent for 3 days and eat some food in there. And then that's the thing too, is just dealing with the animals up here. Like Mark and I had some wild experiences with the bears up here, and you get into some of those remote spots in the fog, and the bears are very curious. It's well known for black bear hunting for a reason. The density of black bears is very high. So I always keep everything out of my tent except for a Snickers that I stuck under Mark's tent one night, and he didn't know.
If they're gonna come for the tents, you better make sure it's not your tent.
Yeah, exactly. No, we set up pretty close on our hunt. It was kind of, and there's a funny little story about Mark. I think about it every now and then. It kind of cracks me up. We were in the tent, and there were some bears circling around, and they were kind of in and out of the fog, but we could see them up above tents, and they kind of made me nervous. And he asked me, legitly, are we going to be all right? Are the bears? And I said, oh yeah, confidence can be. Oh, they won't bother us. No problem at all. We're good. I've never had them. Well, then we're laying in the tent, and a big male black bear watched us for about 3 hours right above our tents, is staring at us laying there. So then we're laying, and I'm hearing noises. I hear him kind of walking around our camp, and I'm laying there, and Mark, it's probably been about an hour. Dark, and Mark goes, Jesse, did you hear that? And I didn't hear anything. And so then I'm on edge, and I'm like listening in my tent, and probably 5 minutes goes by, and I'm intense. So then I'm making up noises. I'm hearing stuff thinking, oh, there is a bear. And then all of a sudden I hear this slight like noise, and I'm like, what is that? And it's Mark, and he's snoring in his tent. And in that 5 minutes, he gets me on edge, and I was like, that's a great tactic. I'm using that. I'm getting the guy to look for the bears, to be on alert, and then I'm going to pass out, which is great. And it got me all on edge, and he was sound asleep right after that. And I laid there for the next hour and a half thinking, are you going to be the guy that says that bears don't bother you? And then there's a bear that comes in my tent in the middle of the night. And it was kind of funny. You know, it was good times.
Yeah, that's my tactic. I was getting you back for that Snickers bar. But yeah, well, you know, it's funny because I probably should have let you know what. So like I could hear this rustling. And I finally determined that it was actually like a flap of my tent that was just kind of rubbing or like, you know, kind of moving in the breeze and flipping back and forth. But it's kind of making like an odd. At first I didn't identify the sound, and then once I figured out what it was, I was like, okay, cool, peace out.
Time to go to bed.
Yeah, and then he was out.
That's great. I'm curious, Mr. Ryan Muckenhern's over here. He's been quiet thus far on the podcast. Ryan, you hunt South Dakota, Wyoming, all those kinds of places quite a bit. Have you ever done Alaska?
I've not done Alaska. No.
What is it like when you hear this kind of stuff? What are you thinking? Because you hunt a ton, but like, what do you think about this kind of stuff?
So for me, this is an interesting podcast and conversation to be in, because I've had this conversation with Mark a couple times. It's not the wildlife necessarily that has me on edge about Alaska. It's the logistics behind transportation of a game animal after the harvest.
Oh, yes, I was going to ask that
and
too.
so for me, what's kept me out of that state is, as a young person who does not have a ton of money to throw around when it comes to this, is game care after the take. And I understand that when you're hunting in areas with apex predators, you're always going to run the risk of losing your game animal, as you and Mark did, to an apex predator, and that's part of the game. But then what to do with it after you take it? And logistically speaking, when you get back to civilization, you know, is it feasible to fly with your trophy and with your meat? Is it better off to ship it back? Is it, you know, to the advice of a person who may be stepping outside of their comfort zone when it comes to this, if you take one or two blacktail in Alaska, what is the best thing you can tell somebody to get their meat and their trophy back home, so that the hunt wasn't just the random act of killing a game animal, but rather a harvest that they can enjoy and feed their family later?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I get that question a lot. Keeping your meat from spoiling up top, the best thing is snowpack.
Sure.
And some of the mountains that I hunt around have some crags and some snow left over in August. So it's a pain in the butt sometimes to hike over a peak or down elevation to get to a snow, you know, but to me, that's the best luck that I've had. I think Mark's told you about the experience we had of what we did was Mark took a buck early in the morning. And when you're rolling is what I found up here. When the deer are out, usually the deer are out. So when Mark took his buck, we cut it up as fast as we could go. We bone it out. We put it in game bags. And what we did was hung it off the biggest cliff we could find where he took his buck, which wasn't very big. And we hung it in game bags with some parachute cord. And I didn't hang it very far off the cliff. Like I said, I've never really had problems with bears up in Alpine, but that year there was no salmon. So the bears were up in the Alpine eating anything they could get. And we get up further up the mountain. I wanted to take Mark to a canyon that I'd hunted before, and there were some really nice deer in there. And when I looked back down to the meat where it was at, I think there was 3 or 4 bears on the meat at that time. And that is no joke. There was 4, I think, bears circling the top of the peak right where his meat was at. So I thought it'd be fine. You know, it'd be no big deal. They wouldn't get that meat. So we hunted, it got fogged out, like it gets brought up all the time, got fogged out, kind of hung out there for a while, come back down the mountain and found where a bear had reached down and grabbed one of the game bags with his paw and pulled it up and got part of the game bag and ripped it. I think we busted him in the middle of it. So he didn't get the full, package that he wanted. So then what we did was, I think I connected all the game bags to one parachute cord, and then I hung it down further on the cliff so they couldn't reach it. And it was probably about 20 feet up from the bottom. So I figured that, that's foolproof. There's no bears going to get it. So we went back down to camp and we camped that night, got weathered in, couldn't hunt that evening, come back up the next morning. And I looked up to my binoculars and no game bags hanging on the cliff. So we went up top to where I tied it off. And what happened, I'm not positive, but what I think happened was that when I tied the parachute cord on the knot, I had blood still on my hands. And I left that scent on the parachute cord. And what they did was they chewed through the parachute cord and then dropped the game bags all the way down on the cliffs.
Oh.
And then they went around from the bottom and got the game bags, and we lost everything. And that honestly is the only time I've ever lost any meat up in the Alpine, but we lost everything. I couldn't even find a scrap of game bag, nothing. They drug. I went and hiking around the mountain for like, a couple hours looking for anything and didn't find, anything. So that was kind of wild itself. But going back to your meat care, I think snowpack is your best if you can. Game bag, snowpack. And what I like to do on a float plane hunt, that's the wildest hunt I've ever been on, is a float plane. You literally get dropped off and that is it. They fly off and you're alone. You're wild. What I do is pack as much ice in a cooler as I can and just top it off. Just pack it with ice. And then when you get down, I put the meat on the cooler. It usually lasts about a week in there or something. And usually the Alpine hunts aren't that long. Usually average about 3 or 4 days. I'll put the meat in the cooler. And then I've hung up a cooler in the trees before. I've put meat in a heavy duty dry bag and sunk it in a lake before. And that worked. There's a couple options. What I like to do is the cooler. I think that's the best one I found. And it works great for the traveling hunter because, like, if a guy wants to come up, he can bring his hunting backpack with all his, like, optics and camera gear or important stuff that he wants in his carry-on. And then in your cooler, you bring all your gear in your cooler. And what I like to do is pack an extra duffel bag in there. And then if you're lucky enough to get some game, it's all cut up, put in the cooler. I mean, and it's so fresh. I mean, you can pretty much Ziploc it and make it home and it'll still be fine. But then you can put all your meat back in your cooler, and then you can put all your gear from the hunt in the duffel bag, and you can check both of them. And usually, you'll get an overweight if you're lucky enough on your cooler, but that's about the only overweight charge you'll get, and you'll still stay under your 3 bags or 4 bags with your.
So you just hit the plane.
Rifle.
You just hit the plane then you check a cooler full of meat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
I don't know why I didn't
it's
think of
not
doing that.
uncommon here. It's very common. People come in with antlers and bloody stuff. I've heard people mailing heads home on postal service, and like I found from talking to people, and what I do is the cooler method. Get a big cooler if you can. And like I said, the antlers are small here. You can the antlers usually will fit in the cooler itself, and then everything's wrapped up in the cooler. They'll check it, but they're used to having so much game go through the airport that it is no big deal for them.
Do you put it
they
on
X-ray
ice,
scan
then?
it. Yep. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep. Put it on ice. I've done dry ice before. That didn't work out as good as I thought. I've heard dry ice worked good, but the dry ice evaporated and melted quicker than we thought.
Sublimates
So
pretty quick.
yeah, it does. So.
Well, then it's and like what we kind of did that trip was kind of like a variation of that, because I shipped up those 2 Yeti Hoppers, and then at the lake where we got dropped off, we put in those, which they act as a dry bag, right? If you want, and then kept some extra gear in there, a little bit of extra food in there, and really it wasn't really the food was really, we got into it a little bit, but to me it was more like if you got stuck there for a few days, like if you got weathered in and you made it back down to the lake, but you couldn't get out, but left almost like a
Small ration.
down there. And then I guess had we had a deer, that's what I planned on shipping it back in on the airplane, was just cut it up, get in that Yeti Hopper, and then on ice, and off you go.
When you go to throw something like that on an airplane, like let's say you have a cooler. I mean, usually a cooler, in the case that you were talking about, where there's those zip ones.
Yeah, it's like totally airtight. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But like if you had a more of like a box style cooler, is there a way to lock those, or do you just duct tape around the whole thing so it doesn't?
I think mostly guys tape them, yeah?
Yeah, tape them. And the airline will tape them. After you check it in, you can ask them right there. Alaska Airlines is awesome. The people there are very helpful. They're in the business of transporting game. It's cool. They'll tape it for you right then. They'll label it, what's in there. And I've never had a problem. I don't travel very often. I have went on some doll sheep hunts and some goat hunts around to where I did travel. But no, everything's worked out great. Another option is a waxed covered fish box.
Yep.
And, that's a big thing. You can get them at most stores here. It's airline dimensional. The biggest one is still under the size of airline regulations. And you're talking Sitka Blacktail. I mean, if you get a big buck, you're talking maybe 50 pounds of meat you're going home with. It's not very much meat. It's awesome meat. The quality is awesome, but you're not talking like elk or, the usual, what people think of Alaska. Like, man, how am I going to get all this home? you can bring 2 bucks home under 100 pounds.
And that to me is kind of my biggest hesitation or fear about Alaska. And again, maybe I was shooting for the moon, thinking like if I were to take a bull moose and having to now work through the logistics of getting that much protein back safely without spoilage and then without waste and all that stuff. But the blacktail hunt, after Mark had concluded that first one that he had gone on with you in the Alpine, it piqued my interest seriously, because then it was a way to get into the country, and it was a way to experience it and kind of be something that a guy could afford to do on an annual or maybe every 2-year basis and not worry so much about the huge feat that is travel to Alaska, travel back from Alaska. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate that. That's going to be taken to heart. Maybe I'll be seeing you next year.
It seems like,
Yeah.
Ryan,
Yeah, no problem.
It seems like your kind of hunt. I feel like a Sitka Blacktail, you're almost like a wine connoisseur, but of like deer. I don't know. Ryan likes the very...
Oh, it'd be your thing.
What's the word for it?
And what kind of mixed bag? I mean, knowing there's ptarmigan in the area. I'm a big forager, so I love berries. I don't know if you've got berries on season right now. What else can a guy get into besides the treasure trove of fish? Can you double bag this with like a bear hunt? Can you do small game?
Yeah, you can. Here on Prince of Wales, I think about 9 years ago, they made it a draw for black bear.
Okay.
So you have to draw the tag. You can do a combo hunt in September. I think that's when the bear season opens, September 1st. So that's a great combo hunt to do at the same time. You can hunt. The bears are up in Alpine right now eating the berries. There's a very good blueberry crop this year. There's very good foraging for mushrooms. I honestly can't stand mushrooms, but I appreciate people going out there and getting off the couch and going hunting and finding what they want to eat. There's chicken of the woods and chanterelles and, a few other ones. It's just very rich with just most everything. Small game itself, there's ptarmigan, I think, is the main one on this island. There's grouse.
I was going to ask, do you have sooties out there?
Yeah, not on Prince of Wales,
okay.
Which is weird to me. I'm still new over here, but I've heard that they're not here.
Okay.
On Revilla Island, Revilla Gagato, and a couple other islands right around here, there is. Okay. And it's very big time. People are very into it. They're more serious than I want to get into it. I've actually went on a couple, and I was like, man, you guys are crazy for this chicken bird, but after watching, Ranella on there, I'm like, man, that's you can get into that. And a lot of people are very serious about doing that around here. I myself, when that's going on, I'm all after steelhead.
Sure.
I live on the river at that time. So, I hear them hooting and stuff around, but I'm pretty much focusing on my next drift.
So I think from like a consumer's perspective, if I'm looking at this hunt, I would consider it somewhat of a safari, if you would. So you'd go to Africa and you'd have this, mixed bag of various plains game, and maybe you get some fowling in and perhaps a large animal. But Alaska could be treated much the same way between the fishing, the small game, the birding, and then the big game aspect of it. So I think that's how I personally now going to look at this and figure out how to get the best bang for my buck, if you will, in going up there and doing like a multi-species or multiple animals. Because I think a non-resident can take 3 deer. Is that correct?
That's it's kind of a hot subject right now. It used to be 4 deer for Prince of Wales, but it's kind of hard to explain. There's a subsistence board, and they set the rules for this island, and they actually just dropped the quota for non-residents to 2 deer.
Okay.
I guess the deer population's in a downswing. I didn't grow up here, and I haven't hunted over here for very long, so the hunting is very good to me. Mm-hmm. But to hear people that have grown up over here and this is their, home forever, the deer population is on a decline. The only thing that's changed that I've heard from the biologists that I've talked to and federal board subsistence member is the wolf quota. There used to be a set season for the wolves on this island, and now they dropped it down to, I want to say, the low teens for the last couple of years. Like I'm talking 13 or 14 wolves for this whole island.
Oh, wow.
And those wolves are, I lost a deer to wolves last year, and I'm not on any side of this whole wolf agenda that's going on this island. But I did lose a deer to wolves last year. I shot this deer right before dark with my bow, and I lost the blood trail on a creek. And it's in a bear infested area. And I backed out that night, and I come back the next morning at daylight, and I could hear birds already on it. So I snuck down in by signs of the birds, just listening to them. I ended up walking right up on my deer, and what it was just the cape of the deer.
No kidding.
And I'm talking, it was just the cape of it. The antlers were still there, and it looked so caped out that the first thought in my head was that somebody found my deer and they took it. And I was thinking, it's a forking horn. And I'm like, no one's found my deer. I'm in a pretty far spot.
Sure.
And I actually got some footage of it, and I'm filming it thinking, what in the world is going on? What happened? And I set the carcass down, the cape of it. And right then I heard a little bit of noise behind me, and I looked up into the muskeg behind me, and 3 wolves are on a dead run right back to the carcass. And what I didn't realize was that where they found my deer, they consumed the entire deer, and a couple other wolves drugged the skin off probably about 30 yards from where the initial site was at. Gotcha. And they were running back down to the kill site to go, chew on the bones. There was no meat left. I have never seen anything like it. Wow. I literally shot the deer at like 3 p.m. and I went back about 7:30 a.m. the next morning, and there was not even a piece of meat on anything. Nothing. It sounds fake. I can't even make it up, but there was nothing left on it. And I ended up putting a game camera on it right then. And the wolves didn't come back. I almost got one with my bow right when then. I drew on one and I couldn't get a shot, and he took off. And then I put a game camera on it, hoping I would get that pack, because they run that corridor pretty routinely. And what I did get was like a 500-pound black bear on there, and he would come through about every 3 days and sniff on that carcass and dig around a little bit on it, which is cool because it's the biggest black bear I've ever had on camera, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so it's down to 2 deer now, but I hunted 4 different mountain ranges this August, and man, it's good hunting on every single one of them. That's all I got to say.
Awesome, man.
Dude, Alaska.
There was deer everywhere.
Alaska's so cool, man.
That's the best place.
Yeah. What do you say we jump into some last calls here real quick, and then call that Hunt Year Round August?
Bam. Sounds good.
Jesse, what do you think? You got a last call here, just kind of like an ending thought? Could be anything. What follow your heart?
I just appreciate having me on here, guys. And it's just cool to be able to share what I, do on a daily basis, because sometimes people take it for granted up here, and it's such a cool place for people to come visit, because I'm part of the transplant here. And to me, it is still so new and so rich that my goal with photography and filming is to get somebody off the couch and experience it. And if this helps somebody come up here and experience a trip of a lifetime, because everybody that I've had come up here wants to come back. I've never not had a return trip. People just love it to death. And it is so special to me that it's cool to have people take interest in some of that stuff, and like I said, if it helps people get up here and a little bit of tips here and there to kind of get that, I always call it embrace the suck, get that over with, to where you can kind of get that learning curve, then man, it's just awesome.
That's an awesome last call.
My last call is I'm pitching a tent in my closet.
That's good pre-hunt training.
Yep.
From the experts.
Yep. I'm going to get my wife to start making weird noises around the house, too, to freak me out.
Man, my last call, Jesse, is, dude, thanks for joining us. Tons of awesome information. For those who can't see Jesse right now, he's wearing his Grundon's bibs right now. Pretty standard attire up there. And, yeah, man, awesome place. Best place on earth, in my opinion.
I would have to say, as kind of an outsider, and I'm gonna say more of a listener to this podcast than a contributor, for my own sake, adventure is what you make it. And I think a lot of people get disenchanted with the fact that they believe that nothing in this world is wild yet. And from the sounds of it, a quick jet set to Alaska and maybe a float plane trip or a boat trip, and you can be into the most untamed and untouched wilderness this planet has to offer. And when you think about that, that is just mind-boggling. And now I'm going to go watch Lord of the Rings.
You don't need a passport either.
No, that's the crazy part. You don't need a passport.
If you live in the U.S.
Man, I'll tell you what. I truly am going to put some homework into this hunt, because this sounds like something that I have to do. So I appreciate everything, man. Seriously.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, and there, like I said, go on the forum. There's an Alaska Blacktail forum. And I run that up here, and I suggest if anybody just kind of wants to get a feel for Southeast in general and just see blacktail hunting, just ask to be a member on that, and it's cool. It's a good forum. They share around a lot of good information, a lot of good tips and stuff on there to help you get out and get outside, go hunt.
That's great. Awesome, dude. Well, hey, Jesse, thanks again for jumping on with us. For everybody out there listening, Jesse, is there like a way people, I guess probably through the forum asking questions, but That'd probably be the best way. But, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm on, social media. Find me on Instagram, AK Mountain Bound, or Facebook, Jesse Knock. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has. Yeah, like I said, I just love helping people out. I think hunters need to help hunters out as much as possible. We're a very small, tight-knit group, and the tighter we can get that is the better for everybody.
Perfect. I didn't want to put you on the spot there at first. I was like, hey, everybody contact Jesse. But hey, it sounds like it's cool. AK Mountain Bound on Instagram. So
Yep. Well, awesome, Jesse, man. Thanks for everything. It's been awesome seeing you and the amazing backdrop that's behind you. Glad you're not fogged in today.
Yeah.
I'll catch you next time.
Wait 5 minutes. It should change.
We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks again. All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. Leave us a review or comment down below. We want to hear what you have to say about the show, maybe what you like, maybe what you didn't like, so that way we can make these podcasts as good as they can be. Hey, if you were interested in some of the information you heard here too, but you don't want to go all the way back and listen to the whole thing again just to get out one little nugget of information, check out the link in the description because we'll have this in PDF form with pretty much everything that we've talked about. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'll be posting about each episode released, so that way you can go back, find these things, maybe grab a little nugget of information that you could take with you to the range, out in the field, or maybe to the kitchen if we're talking about some good food. So, again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.